is a BeachGlass Media production.
The ABC American reality television show, The Bachelorette, is being canceled for the first time ever since its debut in 2003. For those of you who aren't familiar with the show's premise, because you have good taste in television, the show is about a young, beautiful, single woman who dates 25 high-promising men as the Bachelorette sifts through these men by going on dates to dwindle them down in order for her to ultimately find her one true love. And yes, it's true. This show that has been going on strong for 20 seasons has now met its demise. And ABC is pulling the plug on this television dating show for a very unusual reason. Now, you might be thinking, what kind of television operation would dare to pull off a show that's had steady viewership for 20 seasons so abruptly? And you're also thinking, isn't ABC going to lose a bunch of money pulling a show that's already been shot? Well, it can't be, because the show is unpopular because, like I said, 20 seasons. So what happened? Well, when reporters asked, is it because the new Bachelorette they chose has 3 men's first names? ABC stated, quote, "What? Taylor, Frankie, Paul? Hey, 2 of those names can go both ways, so stop being small-minded," unquote. When reporters asked, is it because she was previously a star on The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, so she was previously married? ABC stated, quote, "What? Just because she's divorced doesn't mean she can't be a bachelorette. Why are you so judgmental?" unquote. When reporters asked, is it because she's average? ABC stated, quote, "What? She's a 10 and only 31 years old. Good grief. Why do you hate women?" unquote. When reporters asked, so why did you pull the show since you have a divorced single mom with 3 male first names and some might say is average looking, who has already appeared on reality TV about Mormon wives and is not really what the whole world thinks about when you say bachelorette, which typically, to the untainted mind, you picture a young, beautiful, virgin woman with high potential and being a faithful wife, ready to start a family. So why, oh why, did you cancel the show? ABC responded, quote, "Well, we didn't think the internet would find the video of Miss Taylor Frankie Paul abusing her then husband physically and throwing bar stools at him while children were present in the room, with one bar stool hitting their infant child on the head. So, yeah, slight lack of foresight on our end. We didn't realize domestic violence is still not cool with the typical audience that watches this kind of dating show," unquote. When reporters asked, so what is ABC going to do with reality television moving forward? ABC stated, quote, "Well, since AI is resurrecting Val Kilmer to star in a movie, we're currently looking into rebooting The Jerry Springer Show." My name is Andrew Reyes, and this is Faith in Politics with me, Andrew Reyes. All right, welcome back to the podcast, where I suspect you might be thinking, this podcast is too Christian for my taste, if you're one of those non-Christian people. But you might also thinking, oh, this podcast is not Christian enough and too political for, those of you that may be identifying as Christian. And to those of you, I say, you're right, because this is my podcast and I do what I want. But welcome. Everyone is welcome to this podcast, and I actually appreciate that you're checking it out. I've been having a lot of people say, oh yeah, I hear you have a podcast. I like what you're doing. I like what you have to say. And some people, they're not telling me anything negative, but I suspect you're thinking it. And you know what? That's okay. You're free to think whatever you want. I'm free to think whatever I want. And that's why I have a podcast, because I'm just thinking out loud here. But anyway, welcome. I'm not trying to run you off. Feel free to stay, hang out. It's just me, and me and my thoughts on Christianity and politics, because I find it really interesting, and you should be able to defend your faith in whatever you believe in. And for me, it's Christianity, and I'm gonna defend it till the day I die, because I believe it's the one true religion. And as far as politics go, we are human beings living in this world, living in countries, nations, whatever you want to call it. And I believe the politics plays a big part on society and how we live our lives, and we can kind of, dictate, so to speak, how the world operates. And I think we should be involved in politics to some degree. I don't think we should try to get involved to take control of the whole world or anything like that. But definitely, it does play a part in our lives. And I don't think as a Christian you should separate yourself from politics. I think you should be engaged with politics, because this is the world we live in. We are commanded by Jesus to, carry out the Great Commission. So we are to engage with the people around us. And if we have any kind of influence in the world, it should be a positive influence. And and if that seeps into the political landscape or the political world, then why not? I can only see good things coming out of that. Anyway, I'm blabbering too much. I'm trying to do this intro so I can get to the podcast. I'm on a time crunch. I got to pick up my kids from school. And I've been promising to keep these podcasts shorter, and that is my goal for today. So enough blabbering. I'm just going to get a few things out of the way, and we're going to dive deep into the podcast, which is kind of a continuation on episode 22. But before I do, welcome. Please like, subscribe, rate, comment. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you very much. You can also watch on Spotify. Of course, the audio podcast is still available. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. And also, please be sure, if you're on Instagram, please follow the Instagram page for Faith and Politics. And right there, what I like to do there is post satirical headlines, kind of the Babylon Bee-esque kind of things. It's just for fun. And you will see updates about the podcast on Instagram, because I'm always on Instagram. But, with that out of the way, let's just go straight into it. This is episode 23. Iran is ballistic, and more on forgiveness. Okay, jumping right into the podcast. So more on forgiveness. So in episode 22, I talked about forgiveness, and I kept thinking about it throughout the week. And, at church, the pastor was finishing up his sermon series around the Lord's Prayer. And Jesus talks a lot about forgiveness. And I think that's a key element of what it means to be a Christian, is practicing this lifestyle of forgiveness, which I mentioned, in the previous episode. But there's more that Jesus said about forgiveness, and I found it very interesting, and that's why I want to talk about it today. And Jesus has this parable in the book of Matthew, chapter 18, verses 23 to 35, when it's called it's called the parable of the unforgiving servant. And I think it's a beautiful parallel on the importance of forgiveness. So I'm just got my trusty Bible here. I'm going to just read it real quickly because, if I read it, then we have a framework to work around. But this is what it says, the parable of the unforgiving servant. Then Peter, one of his disciples, came up to him and said, "Lord, how often will my brother sin against me? And I forgive him. As many as 7 times?" Jesus said to him, "I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. So Jesus gives him an answer, but I'm sure they were like, 70 times 7, what does that mean? So Jesus then tells a parable to explain it, because we learn a lot through story. That's one of the ways we see the world, through story. That's why the news is always pushing narratives, because if we can follow a story, we can learn about the world or what someone is trying to say. And so I like that about Jesus. He speaks in parables through story that has a lesson behind it, so that we can learn something. In Jesus' case, to learn about the kingdom of heaven, which is not a physical kingdom, it's a spiritual kingdom. It's how we live our lives, it's how we conduct ourselves, all thanks to the grace of God, through Jesus, through faith. But this is the parable that he tells about, that he says, "Therefore the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payments to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, 'Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything.' And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, 'Pay what you owe.' So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, 'Have patience with me, and I will pay you.' He refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed. And they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, 'You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you?' And in anger his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart." Now, I know that was lengthy, and I probably should have worn my glasses to read that, because that Bible print is very tiny, and I was having a hard time reading that. Those words are small. I'm getting old. But it's the parable of the unforgiving servant. So Peter asked Jesus, "How many times should I forgive my brother who's constantly sinning against me?" 7 times. Of course, if you read the Bible and you study it, you learn that 7 is God's perfect number. So there's a biblical aspect to the number 7. So Peter asks, "Oh, should I forgive my brother 7 times? If this same dude keeps coming at me, sinning against me, And Jesus, you're telling me to forgive. Is there a limit? Like, is it 7 times? And after that 7th time, I don't know, knock him out? But Jesus is like, no, 70 times 7. 70 times 7? Wait, 490 times? So I'm pretty sure they were like, oh, so I should keep a tally, and then after the 490th time, then I could stop forgiving people? No, but that's obviously not what Jesus is saying. It's not. He said 70 times 7 because the idea was you keep forgiving. It's not a definite number of times because, we humans, we want things to be written out plain as day. What do I do? How should I live? But no, Jesus is saying it's an infinite number of times you should forgive. You live a life of forgiving those that hurt you. And he gives this, he talks about this parable that how the kingdom of heaven should operate. So this king in the parable has to settle his accounts with his servants. So imagine it's like the IRS come knocking at your door and they say you owe $1 million. And then you get on your knees and you beg the IRS, please, I have 3 kids. I have a dog and a cat. I can't go to jail. And then the IRS says, you know what? Okay, fine. I have pity on you. Don't worry. Don't worry about the $1 million. Okay. We'll just forget about it this time. So, at that point, you'd probably go, whew, that was a close one. But then that same guy, let's say he has a business partner, the one that just got forgiven $1 million, and his business partner owes him $100. And then that business partner says to him, hey man, look, I can't pay you back those $100 right now. Just give me a week, okay? I promise, just give me a week. I'll gather up the money. I'll pay you back that money that I owe you. But then this guy who just got pardoned $1 million, that guy, he looks at that guy that owes him $100 and beats the living daylights out of him for only $100. And so, yeah, you're probably thinking, what a scumbag. But, that's kind of what happens in the parable that Jesus is telling is, wait a second. The first master forgave you a huge amount of debt. And then that guy that was forgiven can't forgive a guy who only owes him a couple $100. And Jesus says that's the kind of person that God won't forgive. And you don't want to be in a state where God doesn't forgive you. Now, of course, God can forgive anyone. Okay. But the parable, the story that it's trying to, it's trying to convey truth is that why would you, after being forgiven so much, not have the heart to forgive someone else who's done so little to you in comparison? But yeah, what's the point? The point is you have been forgiven much. How do I know this? Well, because you're human and you suck. You're a bad person. You're human. I just said that. You lie. You cheat. You steal. You gossip. You probably look at women lustfully. You sickos. I'm just kidding. What you probably do, you sickos. You drink too much. You're a pathetic human being. But that's just because we're all human. We all sin. We all fall short of the glory of God, as the scripture teaches us. But by the grace of God, you've been forgiven of all that. You are commanded to forgive whoever has wronged you. And that's not me saying, that's just what the Bible teaches. That's what Jesus teaches. And, you just have to deal with that. And the last thing on this issue of forgiveness is that this always comes to mind when it comes to the topic of forgiveness, is that when Jesus was hanging on that cross, when he was dying on that cross after being tortured and humiliated and mocked and just, when he was being killed, what did he say? Jesus said a few things when he was on the cross. And one of the things he said that really stands out and shows that he really is God is that he said, Father, he's talking to his Father, God. He says, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I don't know about you, but that's pretty incredible. As he was dying on that cross, he asked God, and I would imagine in a prayerful way, like, please forgive these people that did this to me. And that shows who Jesus is and was, and is, because, as Christians, we believe he's still alive, but it shows us who he is. He's a forgiving God. And he took the penalty of our sin, because we all sin. I'm not perfect. Okay. I do wrong all the time. I don't want you to think that I'm perfect. I don't claim that, but I do claim that Jesus is Lord. And because of my faith through him, he has forgiven me. That's the only difference between Christians and non-Christians, is we believe that we have been forgiven, and our lives are not our own. Our lives belong to God. So Jesus forgave everything for us, and that promise is available to everybody. So the least that we can do is forgive those around us who have maybe hurt us, but it's very little in comparison to what God did for us, or how much God has forgiven us. But yeah, don't get me wrong. I get it. Life's difficult. We run into all kinds of things. I'm not saying that life's easy. We get hurt. We have emotions, like I've said in the past. But we should, because it is a commandment, and because we have been forgiven, we should forgive those around us. So yeah, that's all I have to say about the the faith portion of this podcast. And like I said, oh man, running out of time here. I got to pick up my kids soon. I just want to give some quick updates on this whole Iran thing. So, what's been going on in Iran, however you want to say it. Just a few things. I'm going to run through this really quickly. I'm running out of time. Is the Iran war splitting up the Republican coalition? That's what a lot of the polls have been, or a lot of people have been suggesting out in the podcast world, in the news. But is the war splitting up the Republican coalition? The latest polling would suggest no, not really. There was a poll, I believe, by YouGov. Said the MAGA GOP approval rating score is 87%. So 87% of people that identify as MAGA GOP approve, and only 6% disapprove. Now, Republicans, so not including the MAGA proponents, Republicans, 81% approve, 12% disapprove of what's going on with Trump and the whole Iran war thing. So what do I think? I think, the podcast bros on the right want to make it seem like the Iran war is splitting up the Republican conservative party from within. It does seem that way, but I don't think that's exactly what's going on. I think if you hang out on X or listen to a lot of conspiracy theory type people, then I suppose you can reach that conclusion, but I don't think that's true. Yes, the war is becoming less popular as it continues to drag on, but I would say, let's just wait and see. Trump promised that this war would be done within 5 weeks. So, we're in week 4. Let's, as the kids say, let's just let him cook. The security chief of Iran, who was probably running Iran, has been killed. So that's the latest in the news. So with that said, when it comes to war, this war, and I'm doing quotes, has been effective because the press secretary, they're trying to do some new messaging tactics. They don't want to really call it a war. They want to call it a military operation. So if I'm saying war, they're considering it a military operation, but it does look like war. And war, like I said in the previous episode, it's not pretty. Okay, it's not pretty. A lot of bad things happen in war. We just have to understand that. The Strait of Hormuz has been in the news. I know in the previous episode I said Strait of Baruz. I don't know what I was thinking. Like I said, I'm trying to get my facts straight. I'm trying to be more professional. But the Strait of Hormuz, that has been big in the news. It's the body of water where oil ships, tankers and all that, they travel through, and it's been taken over by Iran. So why is this a problem? Well, oil can't be shipped to other parts of the world, like to Cuba, for example, which, they have been negatively affected. And you see some of the liberal types going to Cuba to protest the Trump administration, yet staying in their fancy hotels, and just acting weird. I don't think it's working, but it's crazy. It was, I think I heard Greta Thunberg also was saying, no, we got to get more oil ships to Cuba. This is a humanitarian crisis. Like, wait a second. 10 years ago, you were saying global warming and climate change, we got to stop burning oil. But now with this whole thing in Iran, it's like, no. We got to let Cuba burn some oil to save the planet or something. So, yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. If it makes sense to you, leave it in the comments. What else is happening? Let's see. Trump last week called on NATO allies to help with this issue with the Strait of Hormuz. And what did NATO allies say? Well, they rejected Trump's request. So Trump basically made the statement that it's unbelievable that they don't want to help with the war effort, considering that the allies agree with the efforts in Iran. And not only that, the U.S. spends billions of dollars to essentially be NATO countries' military. But, Trump says, we don't need them anyway. So that's a good point. The U.S. does have a super strong military, probably the best military in the world. No doubt about that. But, it would be nice if NATO allies would kind of help, or at least say thank you, Let's see. More on the latest on Iran. Trump states that the war is nearing the end. There's 3 possibilities how this could end. 1, Iran has a unified uprising against the regime. So once again, it's the regime the United States is going after because they're wacko, they're crazy, they're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I don't know how else to describe it. Iranian people, they're great people. The regime, something has to give, something has to change there. So hopefully there's an uprising and they can have some kind of regime change. Another thing that could happen is a civil war in Iran. It's not going to be pretty, but it's a possibility. And 3, another possibility how this could end is that the United States achieves their goal. They set the Strait of Hormuz free. And then the U.S. is done in Iran. Like, that would be the best case scenario. We go in there. We took out the threat of their nuclear ballistics missiles and nuclear programs and open up the Strait of Hormuz so things flow nicely, and then we're done. That would be great. But what else did we see happen last week? Let's see. Iran launched missiles, and it struck Diego Garcia, a U.S.-UK military base. Now, why was this an interesting piece of information? Well, it's a critical piece of information because it proves that Iran was lying the whole time. You know, they said they didn't have long-range missiles. They claim that their missiles only had a range of 2,000 kilometers, which is like 1,200 miles. But this missile that struck Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean was 2,500 miles away, or 4,000 kilometers from where they launched. You know, they were launched from Tehran. So, the Iranian regime lies once again, but are we surprised about that? No, not really. They lie all the time. So just to beat a dead horse, that means Iran, which said that they don't have long-range missiles, ballistic missiles, actually did have missiles that could reach all of Europe. So, yes, is that a threat? Yes. Should Iran have nuclear missiles that can reach all of Europe? No, that's a threat. But what else happened? Iran shot missiles at Jerusalem and other parts of civilian centers in Israel. There was this one story I read where it hit, it landed between like apartments, and it killed some civilians. It's very tragic. Like I said, war is ugly. These things happen. Do I want it to happen? No, absolutely not. But that's a few things that happens when you're in war. So yeah, Iran's just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks, basically, because the regime is psychotic. Okay. But more in the latest news, in recent news. Trump states that effectively the regime has been changed. So technically he's right. We took out the top tier of, members of the Ayatollah and their regime. They just kept getting killed. They would put a new guy in charge, and then that person would be killed. They'd put a new guy in charge, and then that person would be killed. So the regime technically is changing, because they keep dying. But, I think what's happening now is the new people they keep putting in charge are now willing to negotiate. So that's a good thing. Let's see. Trump ordered a 5-day pause on the U.S. strikes on Iran. And that pause is set to expire on March 27th. So Trump is warning if the Iranian negotiators don't make a deal, it's going to be bad for them. Trump is threatening to strike their energy infrastructure. Let's see. Trump says that the war has been won. So he's kind of right, sort of. From an American perspective, Iran's ballistic missile program has been destroyed. Iran's nuclear facilities have been destroyed. Their drone program destroyed. We took out their Navy, their Air Force. I believe we took that out too. So is this victory? When it comes to destroying the regime, possibly you could say that, but is it a political victory for Trump? It's hard to tell. It's too early to tell. But yeah, he sent a list of negotiations to Iran. Said, hey, let's make a deal. Trump's a big deal, man. Oil and gas related negotiations were being made. More concessions were being made. This is the latest. The Pentagon planning to deploy 3,000 soldiers for special operations. You know, some people might say, hey, that's boots on the ground. I thought you said no boots on the ground. Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know what to think about that. He keeps sending our military to the area saying this is not boots on the ground, but it kind of does look like that. So I don't know. That's a tough one. He sent something like 2,000 paratroopers to the region. He's planning to send a little over 2,000 Marines. Why? It's to secure the Strait of Hormuz. It's been taken over by some Iranian military groups. So trying to clear that up. You got to clear that up, or else, yeah, the price of oil per barrel is going to go up. So Trump sent a 15-point plan to Tehran, which includes Iran to dismantle nuclear sites, remove all enriched uranium from the country, and to agree to seize all future enrichment and put limits on ballistic missile capabilities, and demand the full opening in the Strait of Hormuz, just to name a few. Now, Iran denies having high-level talks about negotiations, but, you know, Trump is planning on sending additional Marine units. So Iran denies having, or it just said that. Oh, sorry, I'm reading my notes here. Let's see. 9,000 enemy targets have been struck. Let's see. Here's some latest facts. Iran's ballistic missile attacks and drone attacks are down by roughly 90%. According to the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. The regime is looking for an exit ramp. And that's the story that the press secretary is going with. So the latest news as of recording this podcast is that Iran rejected Trump's deal. What does Iran want? Well, I'm glad you asked. They want the U.S. to end their strikes. They want the closure of American military bases in the Persian Gulf. Iran wants lifting of all economic sanctions. Iran wants total control of the Strait of Hormuz. And they want the right to collect fees from passing ships and some other things. So Iran's asking for a lot of things. And Trump's, he has certain demands. So it's kind of hard to tell what's going to happen. It sounds like Iran's playing chicken with Donald Trump, and I don't know. I don't think it's going to bode well for Iran. So I'll keep you updated on what's going on. Oh, I got to finish this really quickly. In conclusion, it does look like the war is ending soon, or at least winding down, but we can't know for sure yet. Also, I just heard this tidbit that the IRGC, Iranian Armed Forces, they're lowering their minimum age to join their war, to join the military to 12. They're saying if you're 12 years old and you want to fight for us, go ahead. Now, that's not a good look. 12 years old? They want to let 12-year-olds fight in this war? To me, that says that they're desperate. So what do we want? We want regime change behavior. I heard this from Ben Shapiro, and it made sense to me. Regime change behavior. A leadership in Iran that doesn't chant death to America. That would be nice. It'd be nice if the regime doesn't chant death to America all the time. That's just me. But in my opinion, if Trump is successful with his military operation, I think Trump will go down as the best president that the United States has had in a very, very long time. I think it would secure peace for future generations. It would lead to a great economy, and it would lead for hope for a better future. I really do think that. So, I'm rooting for Trump that this all plays out for him, because if it doesn't work out, it's not gonna be good for him. But you know what? Hey, I still have faith in the guy. Okay, so let's see what happens. But if Trump's military operation fails, then by golly, you better pray to the good Lord upstairs that a Democrat doesn't win the presidency in 2028, because they will most likely let Iran build a nuclear bomb to wipe out the U.S. Because, the people on the left, they love sadomasochism. Okay, that's a joke. That's a joke. But that's going to do it for today. I got to go pick up my kids from school. I'm going to be late. I'm such a bad father. No, I'm not. I'm a good father. I'm there for them. I didn't abandon them. But anyway, thank you for listening to this episode. Like I said, I'm trying to make it short and sweet and to the point. And I think I succeeded in this episode, so I'm proud of myself. But I got to go. I'll keep you updated on the Iran war. Like, subscribe, follow the show wherever you listen. And thank you for joining me again today. And don't forget, keep up the faith.